Once upon a time, in a quaint village nestled on the edge of a dense forest, there lived a sweet little girl known to everyone as Little Red Riding Hood. She earned this name because of the vibrant red cloak her grandmother had sewn for her, which she wore everywhere she went. One sunny morning, Little Red Riding Hood's mother called her into the kitchen. "Your grandmother is feeling unwell, dear. I've packed a basket with some bread, cheese, and fresh fruit. Would you be a darling and take it to her?" "Of course, mother," Little Red Riding Hood replied cheerfully. She put on her red cloak, picked up the basket, and set off through the forest to her grandmother's cottage. As she walked along the forest path, she met a cunning wolf. "Good morning, Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf greeted her. "Where are you off to on this fine day?" "I'm going to visit my grandmother who is ill," she replied. "She lives in the cottage at the end of this path." The wolf, having a wicked plan in mind, smiled slyly. "What a kind girl you are. Why don't you gather some flowers for her along the way? I'm sure that would cheer her up." Little Red Riding Hood thought this was a lovely idea. As she wandered off the path to pick some flowers, the wolf hurried straight to her grandmother's cottage. He knocked on the door. "Who is it?" called out grandmother. "It's me, Little Red Riding Hood," the wolf replied, disguising his voice. "Come in, my dear," said grandmother, thinking it was her granddaughter. As soon as the door opened, the wolf pounced and gobbled her up. He then put on her nightgown and cap, and climbed into her bed, waiting for Little Red Riding Hood. When Little Red Riding Hood arrived at the cottage, she noticed that the door was open. She cautiously stepped inside. "Grandmother, it's me, Little Red Riding Hood. I've brought you some food and flowers." "Come in, my dear," the wolf said in a weak voice. Trying to mimic grandmother's, Little Red Riding Hood approached the bed. "Grandmother, what big ears you have." "All the better to hear you with, my dear," the wolf replied. "And grandmother, what big eyes you have." "All the better to see you with, my dear." "And grandmother, what big teeth you have." "All the better to eat you with," roared the wolf, leaping out of the bed. Just as the wolf was about to pounce on Little Red Riding Hood, a woodcutter who had been working nearby heard the commotion. He burst into the cottage, wielding his axe. He struck down the wolf, saving Little Red Riding Hood and rescuing her grandmother, who was unharmed but frightened. Little Red Riding Hood hugged her grandmother tightly. "I'll never stray from the path again," she promised. The woodcutter escorted them back to the village, where Little Red Riding Hood, her mother, and her grandmother thanked him for his bravery. And from that day on, Little Red Riding Hood always remembered the importance of staying on the path and being cautious of strangers. And they all lived happily ever after.
Subscribe to my channel.